Well, thank you, Peter, and also thank you for everything that you're doing for sustainability accounting and in the academic world. I mean, this is a really important initiative, and I'm really delighted to be a part of it. So, thank you. So, my job here is just to do an overview of ISSB, where we're up to. And let me start at the beginning. You will know, but it's worth just, I think, locating the history of the thing at the beginning at COP26, which is just over 2 years ago, now 2.5 years ago. The board itself has been in operation now for 2 years. It took a year to produce the first two standards, S1 and S2. And also in that time, there has been substantial consolidation of investor-oriented sustainability reporting. So ISSB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and Integrated Reporting, and CDSB, Climate Disclosure Standards Board, all rolled up into IFRS. In addition, IOSCO endorsement of ISSB standards. The culmination of the TCFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, is a really big deal for us, not least because our standards are based on TCFD and because TCFD was such a successful by the market, for the market innovation. And also CDP is now using our standards as the basis for capture of data on its platform. Again, hugely important given the scale and reach and status of CDP. So considerable consolidation of investor-oriented reporting. In addition, on the sort of double materiality impact reporting side, there are two main players in this space. One is GRI and the other is the European standard setter. So EFRAG or ESRS or CSRD or however you want to describe it. We have a memorandum of understanding with GRI, which has just been in effect renewed and accelerated. And the idea is that GRI and ISSB serve slightly different purposes. GRI is impact reporting for all stakeholders. ISSB is sustainability related risks and opportunities for investors. And there's an overlap between those two reporting environments, but also a difference. And so the idea is that we work with GRI to identify commonality in the overlap. So we're both requiring the same thing. And then there's difference on either side of that overlap. So a seamless reporting system in effect. And we are piloting that approach with biodiversity in the first instance. So important work ahead with GRI. Also important in the global reporting landscape, given how widely used GRI is globally. Meanwhile, ESRS, also incredibly widely used because it's statutory and required in Europe and because it has extraterritorial reach. Again, ESRS is a double materiality environment, so there's impact in there over and above reporting to investors. The good news with ESRS is that there is considerable overlap with ISSB. We have the same definition of materiality, that's critical. So the IFRS definition of materiality is embedded in ESRS. So in principle, there is the same demand for information for investors reporting under ESRS as there is reporting under ISSB. Now, I say in principle because so far there's only one standard which directly overlaps European and international requirements, and that's climate. So we've worked with EFRAG and the Commission, the European Commission, to produce an interoperability guide which explains precisely how the overlap between the two climate requirements work. So if you're an ESRS reporter, you can the guidance takes you from ESRS to IFRS, and vice versa. The guidance maps you from IFRS to ESRS. The good news is there's huge overlap. I guess not surprising in the space of climate. There are some differences, and those differences are clearly set out. The really important issue with European reporting, with interoperability with EFRAG, is actually not climate. In my view, it's what comes next. So the European standards cover a range of other environmental and social topics, and our standards through SASB provide the only global set of industry disclosure requirements. So as yet, Europe hasn't done industry, and as yet we haven't done beyond climate. So that's where the interoperability really needs to come together. That's where we need to avoid divergence between the standards. Otherwise, the landscape is consolidating really quite well. So that's the, as it were, story to date on standard setting. More generally, there's a lot of work that we're doing around adoption, which won't surprise you. IFRS is required. IFRS accounting is mandatory in more than 140 countries worldwide. But of course, we need to go through that same process of adoption to have ISSB standards be mandatory also. Now, the good news here is that we reckon about 50% of the world's GDP has either declared that it will use our standards or has started some sort of a process in that direction. And meanwhile, elsewhere globally, we're not seeing meaningful divergence, and that's really encouraging. So if you take the US as an obvious example, the SEC climate disclosure rule is in effect a subset of S2. It has essentially the same investor materiality focus. It's pushing in the same direction. It doesn't quite go as far, but it's entirely consistent. The same is true for, although it goes further, the California disclosure. So the degree of convergence globally, I think, is encouraging. So what we're doing is working with jurisdictions on adoption. We've issued an adoption guide. You can find that on our website, which is designed to help jurisdictions, regulators, other stakeholders in the market understand the steps that it takes to become aligned with IFRS, but also to understand what constitutes alignment. So we talk about being functionally equivalent. In other words, having standards that are substantially the same as IFRS, and so understanding what that means is part of the adoption process. We're also producing a load of educational materials. We're working with a partner network to build capacity. Capacity is so important in this space, right? Sustainability reporting is as you all well know, is in its infancy in relation to financial accounting. Now, partly also in recognition of that, the standards build in proportionality and transition reliefs. Those things are hugely important. So proportionality is around making sure that the requirements are proportional to the preparer, right? So that there are not undue burdens. Information is provided that's reasonable and supportable information without undue cost and effort is something which is scalable across different entities to make sure that the larger, more sophisticated entities are expected to produce reporting at a higher level than those who are at a more entry level, as it were. And overall, the standard will increase, the quality of reporting will increase over time. But it's really important that every preparer gets started on the journey and doesn't see some sort of high level that is unattainable from day one. The transition reliefs, again, just facilitate the process of adoption, global adoption towards the global baseline. So things like not having to do Scope 3 in the first year of reporting and not having to do beyond climate in the first year of reporting, things like that, just help the process of getting sustainability up and running. And that's it apart from our work plan. So we went through an agenda consultation process. And the idea of that is part of our due process is to figure out, look, dear market, what should we do next, basically? And the market's response to that, our stakeholders' response is, you should focus on the implementation of S1 and S2. That's the critical issue. Make sure those are up and running. And then we've decided to do, in effect, two projects in parallel of similar importance, but less important than implementation of S1 and S2. The first is enhancement of the ISSB standards. So industry-based standards are absolutely critical to us. The ISSB standards are an incredible resource that we're very fortunate to have. And the question is, gradually over time, how do you evolve, develop the ISSB standards so that ultimately they become the IFRS industry standards? And then in parallel to that, we have two research sort of topical themes that we're researching. We have to go through a research phase before we formally start a standard setting phase. And those two topics are biodiversity, fairly broadly defined, and human capital, defined to include human rights in the supply chain. So early days on both of those two projects. And note on the biodiversity topic, we are working together with GRI as well as developing our own project in that space. So and building on the work of TNFD, not to be confused with TCFD, which has done extraordinary groundwork for standard setting in the area of nature and biodiversity. So there you go. That's a broad overview of all things ISSB, a lot happening. If there's one message to leave with you, it would be the huge importance of capacity building, of education, training, understanding, practice, development of norms, and so on. And that's why I think the work that Peter, you and others are doing is so important. So thank you.